All right, morning everybody. Is this thing on? We working? Everybody hear me? Okay, so I'm going to take 2 minutes and talk about what Bonnie was just talking about and give you an example. And it spans a pretty good period of time. In the late 80s, early 90s, ODOT asked a consulting firm to go do an evaluation out on TV Highway around the area around about 185th Street. And the report came back and it said, go do all these things. And some of them were things like put up some signing and do some striping and do some illumination and improve a crosswalk and do some other things. And ODOT took that recommendation and then produced a project. And the project went out and it put a crosswalk in at I don't remember if it was 185th or 183rd or somewhere out there. And we striped it, and there was illumination, and we evaluated the illumination at that location, and we did some other things at the other intersections, and we moved on. And about 20 years later, we did some other improvements out there, and we added some extra signing, and we did some other things, and we refreshed the striping. And a few years after that, there was a tragic accident. And a couple of kids were crossing, 3 kids were crossing the street. It's a 4-lane highway. There's a little bit of a median out there. And one person stopped. It was dark. It happened to be Christmas Eve. Horrible tragedy. A guy who was impaired didn't stop. He hit the kids. Horrible result. But as we went through all of this and we got sued, we were party to the suit, and so was the driver, and some other people got involved in it too because it happened to be in a jurisdiction of a county and a city. So everybody was at the table. And as we moved through the lawsuit, the review of all of the records that we were able to find about this brought us to a point where the decisions that were made and all of the stuff that came about as to how we got to where we were be able to be documented for nearly every decision that was made, except for one. And that was, did we evaluate the illumination to see if it met standard? Now, I happen to know who designed that, and he did. And he consulted with somebody who was an expert in illumination at the time, but he didn't record it because that wasn't our policy or our standard or the way we did business at the time. And because we couldn't document that we had evaluated the illumination and said that it was up to standard, the court assumes we left that out on purpose. And because of that, our liability was very high, and we had to settle that suit. And even though the driver was impaired, the driver didn't do what he was supposed to do legally, which was when somebody stopped at a crosswalk, you have to stop too. And he was speeding. All of these things were important, but ultimately, because we hadn't documented a decision, a simple one, really, one you might not even think needed to be recorded, we ended up in a place where we couldn't defend ourselves as well as we could have. So that was 20-some years after the design. We have since enhanced the crossing immensely, but that doesn't help anybody who was there. So my name's Mike Kimlinger. I'm the state traffic roadway engineer. Heidi is the the roadway manager, and she would normally be giving this, but she has some personal things and had to take care of that, so I'm going to stand in for her, and so forgive me if I speak wrong once or twice. Carol will fix it up. So a lot of things go on in roadway. Carol's going to say that roadway is the hub of everything that happens at ODOT, and she's probably right.
All my stuff.
So a lot of things. We develop the standards, we hold the manuals and the guidance for everything that happens for the way things are done. You know, how you build the alignment, all of those different pieces. We get involved in national committees having to do with the development of the Green Book, AASHTO, having to do with the development of lots of things like that. I have folks on staff, and we reach out into the regions periodically to see if anybody else is interested in being parts of those committees. We develop training and deliver it. And approvals for things that need to happen when you're doing designs come through our office. So those design exceptions that somebody talked about, those come through our office. Quite a few folks in roadway. Did she outline this? Yeah. That's the section that is roadway out of traffic roadway, and experts in many parts of the things that you will have to be designing. We also do ADA. If anybody's new to ODOT, you may or may not know that we got sued under the Americans with Disabilities Act compliance. So there's a lot of things going on there. We're going to have to deliver a lot of new curb ramps across the state over the course of time. And we also carry standard drawings here. We do the interchange and freeway standards, rural and urban highways, roadside design, bike ped. We're part of that discussion about practical design, so which choices are being made as we go through and do the design? Is it that very best, highest standard, or are there things that will work for the community and the roadway that are not that highest standard? And contract plans development. So a lot of manuals and a lot of things that come from those manuals. We do tech bulletins for things that don't fit into our specifications when they're published. New book comes out in about a year. Yeah. A lot of stuff like that comes through ours. There is an engineering portal for ADA, and I would encourage you to go find that one if you're going to do any designs along the roadway. If you're a roadway engineer, you're probably doing that. Yes. Interchange modification request. So if you're doing something on the interstate, we have to work with FHWA and get an approval from them, and we help you put that together and move it forward. All design exceptions, so.
It just doesn't have to be a modification, it can be a new interchange.
Absolutely.
We don't build that often, but.
Absolutely.
Mostly modifications.
And then ADA. So under ADA, there's things like design exceptions. If you're familiar with the curb ramps along the side of the road, things got to be flat in certain parts. They got to be sloped, but no more than a certain amount in other parts. They have to be so wide. They have to be no longer than this if they're too steep, stuff like that. If we can't meet all of those things, you need to get a design exception. That comes through our office. If it's an unsafe crossing, maybe we don't build curb ramps at all. Maybe we close the crossing. That's a coordination with traffic and roadway. That comes through our office to get approved. And then anytime we work with any other entity, private or public, so local agencies like cities and counties or developers who are doing things along the highway, like a Walmart or a Home Depot or something, we have an agreement with them, an intergovernmental agreement. And that agreement has language in it that addresses many things, and one of those is the responsibilities under ADA. So design exceptions. So how many people here first year doing anything having to do with design? Second year, third year, fourth, and then more than that. So most of you have a fair amount of experience, but some are very new. Design exceptions are not bad. They're things that explain our record of decision. They record that record of decision, and they're our way of saying, we know what we're doing, and we intend to do this. It isn't exactly the same as the standard, but it works, and it's sufficient for what needs to be done. All of that should probably be done digitally and project-wise. There's still a few things that are coming in on paper, but almost nothing now. It's almost all electronic. ADA, so those design exceptions are all coming in electronic now too. There's a reason for that. We need to take all the information off of the ADA design exceptions and relate it all the way back to the individual curb ramp or pedestrian push button that is on a particular corner at a particular mile point along our highway, so that we can report back to the court system that we've done that. For all of that stuff, there's a link. These guys are getting a live version of this, right? So the link will be active when they get it. Yep. So you'll be able to click on that. So under ADA, we went out and we inventoried every curb ramp in the state. There's 27,335 curb ramps. 97% of them are bad. When I say bad, that means they're not compliant. The non-compliance could be very simple, just a little bit of a slope wrong, or it could be very egregious, they don't exist at all. We have to provide access to everybody. We have standards and guidance for that. We've got some new tools. We have an accessibility consultant, and you can find our current inventory on the TransGIS. Anybody used TransGIS? Very good. The inventory that's in there right now will be updated in June with some additional information, and it'll be updated twice a year after that. So the HDM is our main explanation of how we are applying all the standards that come to ODOT. It has many of the things in there, in fact, all the things in there that are in the Green Book are mentioned or talked about, and our policies or methodologies for dealing with them, including things like design exceptions. There's quite a few chapters. There's even more appendices. We do tech bulletins. That's a directive that comes out that says, yeah, it isn't in our policy or manuals yet, but here's how we're going to address this thing until it is. You may or may not know who Dave Pauly is, but he's our standards engineer, so he holds all of that stuff where it can be got at, and you can get a hold of him fairly easily by Googling him in ODOT. We have a lot of other subject matter experts for each of the different pieces of the HDM. Standard drawings. So we produce a set of drawings which reflect our policies, and those are the things you use for guidance if you're going to do those particular things. They are developed and stamped by an engineer here at ODOT, who's the engineer of record for those. We keep original copies, and we maintain those and update those on a yearly basis. In fact, sometimes the updates are twice a year, but mostly it's yearly.
For the ADA there.
For the ADA, they might be more often than that, yes. So those are available to be used on almost anything. They are also the responsibility of the engineer of record to employ them correctly. Standard details are a little bit different. While they portray many of the similar kinds of things, they're used for project-specific sort of stuff where here's the general area in which you should be working with this set of criteria, but you have some leeway, and you pick these pieces of it, and you personalize that standard detail for your project, and then you stamp that as the engineer of record. Lots of times those are used exactly as they come out of our website, but sometimes you will make changes to them so that they fit into your project. So interchange and freeway standards, we have what's left of what used to be called the preliminary design unit in our area, and they deal with interchanges and freeways quite frequently. The Rose Quarter that's going on, project going on in Region 1. There's some work going on 205. All of those kinds of pieces take a lot of thought about what are the things that are going to happen and how do they affect all the little bits and pieces that are adjacent to or incorporated into the highway, and try and bring together all the different pieces to work. And so we have somebody who can help you with that kind of stuff. We've got a couple of folks who do a lot of things around roundabouts. If you get into a project and a roundabout is one of the options, you should be sure you engage our office. Rich Crosser-Laird and Kevin Hawes will be invaluable to you, especially in public meetings. And so a whole bunch of folks that you can get a hold of. There are links in here to get them. Heidi's the roadway manager. Tondra Mortensen, who was a
Region
2 designer for close to 20 years. I stole her from Carol.
Yes, you did.
She's very good and can help you with anything having to do with ADA. She's good with other stuff too, but that's her main focus, and she's very busy but very good at it. Tyler took care of our inventory. Roger Gutierrez, while he's an expert at ADA, is also our bicycle and pedestrian engineer. Dave Pauly, as I mentioned, standards. Lily is helping with all of the standards and all of the drawings. She knows them very intimately and can help you with how come we're doing that there, or what does this really mean? Kent Bleck and Dave Warwick on interchanges and preliminary design, Christopher Henson for rural, and Rich Crossler-Laird for urban. And take questions at the end?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay.
So again, I'm Carol Cartwright. I'm the Region 2 roadway manager, and now I get to talk about the stuff that's more fun, we would say, in the region. We actually get to apply all the standards and stuff that they do to real life projects. And for us, that's exciting. There are 5 regions, as you know. These are the 5 roadway managers in each region. There's some of us that have been here, Mike and I, for 34 years. Some that are quite new, like Jennifer, who's here from Region 4. Some regions have more than just roadway. Region 4 has hydraulics. Region 5 has traffic. There's some regions that might do other things, like Region 2, we don't do traffic control plans, but Region 3 does. So there's some differences, but the bulk of our crews are made up of roadway designers, and we do preliminary design, we do some hydraulics, we do erosion control, we'll do traffic control at times, and I'll talk more about that at the end. And we have specification writers who write our special provisions, and then we have drafters on each crew that will draft our contract plans. The roles of Region Roadway: we resource, design, and produce the contract documents for the roadway portion of STIP projects. We also get involved in maintenance and emergency projects. They might look slightly different than the STIP projects, but we also do the design work on those. We provide roadway expertise to the areas, districts, planning consultants, and local agencies. So when they have a question about roadway design, they will call us. I have 2 PE2s in my office, and almost everybody has a PE2 in there that's an expert. They are expert in various different things, and I usually get them involved in all these questions. We do construction support, so not only do we get involved in the design portion, we also get heavily involved in construction. They need our help. Every time they want to make a change, they got to come back to the engineer of record, and we have to do some redesign or help them figure out what we need to do. We review outsourced projects, development. So let's say a big Walmart's going in on our highway. We get involved in the review of those. We have to make sure that they're doing what they need with the roadway. The access is designed properly. The ADA ramps are put in correctly, because often they have to put in ADA ramps. We also review surplus property. So when we have a request to get rid of a piece of property we've owned for a long time, we look to see if maybe we might need to keep it for future use. So we have a roadway designer that would look at that and say, yes, let's keep it, let's not get rid of it. We write, review, and concur on design exceptions. So we are the writers of most design exceptions. In fact, we even have to rewrite for consultants many of the time. So we review their exceptions to make sure they're written in the right format and they make sense. Almost always with design exceptions, we'll call one of the experts Mike talked about. So before we even write it, because we want to know that we're going to send it in and it's going to get approved. So if it's on a rural highway, we'll call Christopher. If it's on an urban section, we'll call Rich. So we have a back and forth with all of them quite often. And then it comes to me, and I concur on the design exceptions, and then it gets sent to tech services for their approval. So we don't actually approve in the region. It happens at Mike's level for the approval. We also get heavily involved in scoping for new projects that we're putting into the next STIP. We spend months, unfortunately months, on scoping new projects to be put in the new STIP. And we're kind of, like Mike said, the hub, and I'll talk about that more. We're also involved in a huge variety of projects, some really exciting ones, some not so exciting ones, like a road with 200 ADA ramps. You might get a little tired of designing an ADA ramp by the end of that. But we've had projects like this one up here is the diverging diamond down in Medford. We have first one of those kind of interchanges in the state. We have been involved in huge projects like the lower right is the Pioneer Mountain Eddyville. I don't know if you've heard of that, but that was a massive project. And this is one of the massive pipes that were put in on that project. There's a long history with that project, but it turned out really good in the end. We work on the coast, we work in the mountains, we do 1R, we do 4R, so we do any range of them. We have very straightforward, very complex, a lot of different variety. Here's a little bit more. We've actually built a roundabout in Sisters. I think it's the first, well, it's not the first roundabout on our system since Astoria, but Astoria was a roundabout we built many years ago. First one, then we built none for a long time. We've built one on Verboort on Highway 47, and now we've put this one in at Sisters, and now we're working on designing several other ones. Very exciting to get to design a project like that. There's a very urban project. I think this was Region 5 down in the left corner. Mountains in the right corner. Miles of paving shown in the middle, and then up in the right corner is Newburgh-Dundee bypass. Just like Pioneer Mountain, we rarely get involved in projects that get to go off on a new alignment. It's very fun to design something out in, virgin territory that we've never touched. It was a big project. We're still working on it. We're on phase, 4. It's a lot of phases. And we'll probably be working on it for years to come. Because we didn't build the whole thing. We had a whole big, long thing designed that we didn't build. So elements of design. Again, here's the manuals that we work with. We have, of course, the Highway Design Manual, which is our main guide. If the system is local, we actually do some design work for local agencies. We need to look at AASHTO or their standards. They don't follow our Highway Design Manual, which is generally more conservative than AASHTO. Again, if we need design exceptions, we need to apply practical design, which is a catchphrase you'll hear. It's morphed over the years. It was called context-sensitive design, CS3 or cubed or whatever it was, and now it's practical design. And it means just making sure you look at what's out there, the context of your area, and that you're designing appropriately for that area. You're not putting in some wide shoulder that's not going to be necessary if you have 2-foot shoulders before and after the structure. Maybe you don't need that wide a structure. So we'll write design exceptions. We base them on these manuals. We base them on our engineering judgment. The engineer of record will stamp that exception before it goes in for approval. We design the horizontal vertical alignments, cross sections, lane configurations, on and on. We do a lot of different stuff. And that's the point I want to make about roadway. And I'll show at the end about how we get involved in just about everything. Our deliverables are our contract plan sheets, cost estimate, compiled special provisions, construction schedule, and narrative. We have our hands in all of this. We put together most of this with the help of the other disciplines. So we start from the beginning and we go all the way to the end. A lot of disciplines don't necessarily get started at the beginning. So we're at the very beginning doing the survey request. So we get to understand and what we need for survey. So we have a good handle on what survey needs. So we put in the request, we do the files. We do 3D modeling, and often we do the modeling for other units. So there isn't a lot of hydraulics designers or geotech designers that know how to use inroads and know how to model. And so we do some of that work for them. So it gets us involved in that unit. We do interchange layout sheets, which is a preliminary design task. It's when we do a new interchange or we do a modification. So we get our hands involved in that. We do design exceptions, which I talked about. We have what we call an e-bids package, which is posted when a project goes out for bid. It's the stuff that a contractor would want to see when they're bidding. So it could be all the cross sections. It could be some alignment details, reports. And then at the end, we do a construction handoff. Not really the end, but we hand that off before it goes out to bid to the construction office. We sit down with them, then we go over what it is that our reports show, our modeling shows, how they're going to build this. We make sure they have everything they need to get this project constructed. And then we're there when it's constructed. So we often get involved, as I said, afterwards when they have questions or need changes. And so back to being the hub. We are the hub. We have always been, and that's why I find it the most fascinating place to work, because everything comes in to roadway at the end to get the package complete. We're changing some of that with ProjectWise. It's been easier to put some of the responsibility out to the other units, but we get involved in every aspect. If it's planning, I have people that are involved with the planners when they're just going out and talking about transportation plans. We have to be involved then so we know what they're putting in their plan. They can't put something in we wouldn't approve, like narrower lanes, or if we don't feel that's appropriate. We get involved with traffic, because they give us, what does our left turn refuge storage need to be? Do we need a right turn decel? All that stuff we get from traffic. Geology, environmental. Environmental tells us what to avoid, so we need to know if we need to work around an endangered plant or species that's out there. How do we deal with it? We get involved with technical services when it comes to asking questions about design standards and other guidance that we might need. And again, with construction, we need to get them involved early and often to make sure we're building a project that they can actually build. And one of the main things is we need to have maintenance involved from the beginning. So we are often the ones that go out and talk to maintenance to make sure that they're getting a product that they can actually maintain in the future, so that we're not building some kind of system that they can't, a bunch of landscape that we can't actually maintain. We don't actually do the landscape design. We have people for that, but those are the kind of questions you would be answered. Is there any drainage problems out there that we need to handle? They're the guys that know how to handle all that, or what needs to be fixed. So that was pretty fast paced, but so does anybody have any questions? Like I said, it really is the most fun place to work. Yeah.
I heard a couple mentions of the urban design initiative.
Yeah.
I'm a planner. I work in the transit
Uh-huh.
section, so I'm not as familiar with roadway design being somebody from the transit section. Yeah. Can you speak to the urban design initiative and how that will inform or currently informs your design standards for roadways? How those two integrate together?
So I can give you a little bit on that, and Steve can stand up and talk some more if he thinks I haven't caught all of the bits and pieces. He's been actually the lead on that for the last year or two. There's a big need out there for us to figure out how to design things that work better in the crowded inner city or neighborhood type environments where our highway runs through that section. How do we accommodate all the pedestrians and bicycles and all the interactions that go on and all the other needs of the community while still addressing some of the primary needs of the highway? We have to get freight through. We got to get people from one part of the city or the county or the state to the other. We need to make sure that we're designing things that are safe and all of that stuff. And so there's always been a lot of flexibility in design. There's a lot built into the AASHTO books and ODOT's interpretation of those books into our manuals that would allow for many things to happen out there, but not well understood about how to apply them. And the emphasis for pedestrian and bicycle facilities hasn't been as high in the past as probably it could have been. And so the Urban Design Initiative is an attempt to try and bring all of those pieces more to the forefront and to show all of the folks who do design for ODOT that there are other options, and you should explore those as you move forward, and you should apply the principles that are in there to the situation that you have. So you need to understand as you're doing these things some of the context of the area that you're in, and your design should reflect the needs of the users and the needs of the folks who pass through that area. Steve, you want to say a little bit more?
I think you covered it pretty well. It's really taken the practical design approach to another level. The bridging document that's going to replace some of the chapters in the highway design manual and the traffic manual is just about complete. We're looking at the final drafts, and we're scheduling some rollout training that will be happening, I think, this fall. So there'll be more to come on that, and an actual training to come up with. It's really kind of setting, like Mike said, looking at the context of this particular section, and what should the speed be? How do we handle parking? What about pedestrian crossings? All those things within that area, instead of just saying, well, this is this type of highway. Here's the width of the shoulders and the travel lanes I need. It's going to help provide some of that flexibility of looking at that particular site and setting the right design criteria for it.
How much time do we have?
We have about less than 10 minutes.
Okay.
Oh,
So
Any
I
other
went too
questions?
fast.
Other questions? If you don't ask questions, we just preach at you. So.
Yeah.
So I know it was mentioned yesterday, but what's just a brief definition of 4R, 3R, and 1R?
Oh, yeah, I could do that. 1R is what we used to call pave mainly, but it's resurfacing. So all the R's have and I'll try to get them. It's resurfacing, rehabilitation. The last one's reconstruction. What one did I miss? Anyway, they stand for something, huh? Anyway, so 1R is that preservation project, the one that we're just paving the road. However, it's not usually just paving the road anymore, because we've got to, if you're overlaying, you got to deal with the guardrail because you're lowering the height of the guardrail. Or you're going through a city and there's 150 ramps, like in West Salem that we're doing I think that was 3R. Well, I think parts of it were 1R. If it's 3R, it goes up to 2 lifts. So if 1R is 1 lift of paving, so that'd be either 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 inch, you're doing 1 lift. If it's inlaid or overlaid. So it's not an inlay overlay, that would put you up to a 3R standard. So that means you're digging in and you're putting two lifts back. So that brings it into the 3R level. No 2R at the moment. We're having to do all the ramps with 1R now. So you could even end up doing way more than you thought with the road, maybe even some reconstruction in areas. 4R is reconstruction. Or a lot of people would say it's a modernization job, but it doesn't have to be modernization. If you're out there, we're going to be doing all the way through Carlton, full depth. So we may be doing sidewalks, storm drain. Well, we will be. It is a full depth reconstruction, which puts us into the 4R category. And the standards are slightly different for each one of those. So you have to look in the highway design manual to know what standards you're building to and what you may or may not have to write an exception for if you deviate from. So those are all spelled out in the highway design manual with the definitions, probably better than I just gave.
So you've heard design exceptions a whole lot already today. As you've probably heard from almost everybody who's up here, engage and learn about and do things early. Ask questions, get people involved. Sometimes design exceptions are complicated because you're deviating from standard and you might have to do a lot of things that either we've done many times or that we've almost never done. Because of the circumstances of your project, you should make sure that you're communicating early and often. That's a mantra for these kind of things. Communicate early and often. Get some alignment on the things that you intend to do. Talk to people who've done them before. Find and look for examples of how this sort of thing was treated.
Yeah.
Your region staff is going to be involved in developing the application for the design, the request for a design exception. That'll come in. That gets reviewed by whoever the manager assigns when it comes to my office, and then it gets reviewed by the roadway manager, and then it comes to me and I review it. So these things are scrutinized a lot. We take them pretty seriously, but they are really just a record of decision, and you shouldn't be afraid of them. We have to use them on nearly every project, if not every. I haven't seen a project yet that hasn't had a design exception of one kind or another.
And there's usually pretty straightforward reasons why you would go there. So they're pretty easy to get through. We like I said, we call Mike's office or Heidi's office and talk to the right person up front, so we know that we're going to get approval, that it makes sense.
Other things that you want to be in communication early and often about are you're going to get involved in dealing with ADA. You're going to have some advice because we don't have everything developed to the level of the 100-year-old document called the Green Book from AASHTO. It's going to take us a while to get that level of expertise in the guidance documents that we have. We do have stuff out there, but there are lots and lots of situations, and so you'll want to touch base and get some help there. And many of the things that you'll have to do will require design exceptions for that too, and we review those very closely.
Yes, those are harder to get.
Yes.
And there's a moving target with ADA at the moment. Hopefully we'll standard out in a little while where we're not having to change our designs, but it's still fluid at the moment.
So those are some of the things. Other questions?
Following up on the 1R, 4R question, how does a single function project differ from a 1R?
Well, single function would be like if you were doing something underneath a bridge, and that's all you're doing. You're not touching anything, so we can stay away from some of the standard stuff. Or you're doing signal work at you put back plates on signals. That would be a single function. And so it just gets us out of following some of the more stringent standards when we're doing that, or not having to deal with ADA. Mostly that, like if we're on a bridge and that we have sidewalk on the bridge, but all we're doing is work underneath the bridge, we then don't have to address the ramp down from each corner of the structure if we're doing a single function project. We don't have the same requirements for 3D design on that type of project. So there's a few things. I mean, there aren't too many single function. I mean, technically a rumble strip, I guess you would call it. So all we're doing is grinding rumble strips. We wouldn't have to ask for all the design exceptions for that, like the width of the shoulder.
Yeah, so maybe an example that helps with that is a preservation project on a rural 2-lane highway. It's got shoulders that aren't all the way up to standard. It's got some supers that aren't quite right, or some spirals that aren't quite up to standard, and it's got some sight distance issues. As you do that rural 1R job, you're going to have to get design exceptions for all of those each time you go out to do them, to record the fact that we know that that's there and that as we're doing this work, we're not fixing it. Mm-hmm. But for a single function, you don't have to do that. You might have to get some specific things around the function that you're doing, but you don't have to address everything.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, thank you, Mike and Carol, for that information.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Let's give them a hand.